Hello and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 15, Wednesday, January 23rd, 2019.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and...
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back, everyone. I am your host, Courtney, and today I am joined by my co-host, who is certainly the fairest of them all, Emily.
Well, hi ho, Courtney. It's great to be back, and thank you. That's
You're
so sweet.
Welcome. If you haven't guessed, today we're talking about Walt Disney's original princess, Snow White. Classic fairy tales are a profound source of inspiration for the Walt Disney Company, and it all started with Snow White. We plan to discuss these classic literary influences as part of our new Fairytale Favorites series. We're certainly going to continue with the other books that we have planned throughout the year, so this isn't going to be a series all in a row, but just know that when you see Fairytale Favorites in the title, we're taking it back to the classics. So Emily, why don't we dive right into this one and its history?
Great. So we, of course, decided to start with Snow White because she started it all, and what better place to start than the beginning? For this, we turn to the brothers Grimm. So Grimm's Fairy Tales is the most cited source for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but I do want to preface that the version that we read might be very different than ones that you have heard down the grapevine or from friends, other readings, because these are told over and over, and that's kind of the unique and great part of these stories. So the Brothers Grimm version comes from two brothers, Jacob Ludwig Karl Grimm and Wilhelm Karl Grimm, born a year apart, so very close, wrote these stories. But they have a very interesting beginning. They did not start out as storytellers. They were actually studying at the University of Marburg for law. Their father was a lawyer and had a profound influence on their upbringing, so they wanted to study law. But when they were in their philosophy classes talking about the origins of law and the meaning of law, they became very interested in philosophy itself as well as linguistics and the origins of law, which then led them towards German language and German oral history, and that sparked a whole new path for these two brothers. So influenced by these new passions and the German Romantic movement that took place in the 19th century, there was a big emphasis on folk culture. So the brothers started collecting fairy tales and stories because they wanted to document German language, stories, and customs, and that led to their first two volumes of fairy tales that was once called Children's and Household Stories. So we call it Grimm's Fairy Tales as like the compilation of the two, but they were published under a different title in two different volumes in 1812 and 1815. They would, though, continue to edit and revise these stories. So that's why I preface that you might hear different versions, even though it says Brothers Grimm attached to it, because they kept changing their stories depending on the tastes of their audience. So it was pretty popular to change the original tale depending on what the quote bourgeoisie class wanted, what kind of morals they wanted to promote, or things they found distasteful found their way out of the stories. So that's why you get some different versions, and that's why it's hard to find an agreed upon original tale for a lot of these stories, and also because they come from all over Europe, most of these fairy tales, and even though Brothers Grimm wrote it, like Cinderella is included in Grimm's Fairy Tales, but we also hear Cinderella being a French tale. So different countries also have their own takes. Moving forward, after collecting these stories, they went on to be librarians and professors at the University of Göttingen. I'm sorry, I don't speak German, and the University of Berlin, and they had a focus in German philosophy, linguistics, and literature. So they continued to revise these stories and push them forward. And they would even serve in German parliament, which I thought was interesting.
Very diverse career there.
They did. They were writing a German dictionary, and that was the work they were working on when they both passed away. But the fairy tales is what they're known for, although they weren't that popular when they were published in 1812 and 1815. I think it picked up more as more people could afford books, buying and reading more books, and just over time. And I think as new media, like you said, Disney turned to the classics as inspiration. So I think as new media came forward with radio, television, even early Nickelodeons, those shorts, I think that's what really pushed that forward. So that's all I could really find. There's not too much else out there other than it comes from Brothers Grimm.
Yeah, I think that, those tales certainly have been passed down, but now in our current era, when you think of certain fairy tales, you think of their Disney interpretation. Like if I say Snow White, you're going to picture black hair, blue, red, and yellow dress. Like that's who comes to mind. When you think of the Seven Dwarfs, it's the iconic ones within Disney. So let's talk about that history a little bit. We've certainly talked about Walt Disney's early career extensively in our 9th episode, which was about the Bob Thomas biography, but let's refresh a little bit on this subject. So after the success of the Mickey Mouse shorts and the Silly Symphony cartoons throughout the late 20s and early 30s, Walt set his sights on his next challenge, and that was a feature-length animated film. At the time, many people called this idea Disney's folly in the trade press prior to its release, just because it had really never been done on that scale before. Some people even feared seeing a full animated cartoon in color for that long could cause people to go blind, and I think that's really funny now because that's such a Paramount thing for children is animated films. It's like, oh, it was a big concern for them back then. And I should note that this film is widely accepted as the first animated feature film, but its distinction is that it's the first completely hand-drawn animation. There were some other films preceding this. Some were non-American or used other animation techniques like silhouettes, but they are considered animation too. But the shorts released by Disney leading up to Snow White were known for their quick gags, probably like a 7-minute gag-filled short story with Mickey and his adventures. So Walt knew that he'd need something with a stronger narrative and more heart to exceed an hour in length, pretty much 10 times the length of one of those shorts. So he turned to his inspirations from childhood. Some of my research noted that Walt fondly recalled his grandmother reading him fairy tales from the Brothers Grimm or from Hans Christian Andersen. However, the most agreed that the largest influence was a 1916 silent film adaptation that Walt saw as a young boy in Kansas City. And this is verbatim from Disney A to Z. It says, Walt had gotten the idea for the film when he was a newsboy in Kansas City, and he saw a major presentation of a silent film version of the story starring Marguerite Clark. The screening was held at the city's convention hall in February 1917, and the film was projected onto a 4-sided screen using 4 separate projectors. The movie had a tremendous impression on the 15-year-old viewer because he was sitting where he could see 2 sides of the screen at once, and they were not quite in sync. So he remembers this storytelling version of it on film, and that sticks with him years later as he's debating what should be my first story. So production for the film began in 1934, and it took 3 years to make. It was a huge success and earned $8.5 million in its initial release. Now, Disney A to Z also points out, quote, for a while after its release, the film became the highest grossing motion picture of all time until finally surpassed by Gone with the Wind a couple of years later. The statistic is all the more surprising when one realizes that children were paying a dime to get into the theaters in 1937, and the film, of course, had great appeal to that age group, end quote. That is a lot of dimes to make up $8.5 million in 1937 dollars. The film was then re-released in cinemas periodically, and I looked at the dates for those, and it was actually every decade all the way through 1993, so it was released in theaters again in 1993. But then at that point, home video became popular. It was first released on VHS in 1994. And we continue to see DVD and Blu-ray releases today. Snow White recently kicked off the Walt Disney Signature Collection, the latest series of those Blu-ray releases, in 2016. So I think that about sums up its basic history. I do have some facts that I may pepper in throughout our discussion, but why don't we dive into what we read?
Okay, great. So again, readers, there's many versions of Grimm's out there. So the version that we used was from the Barnes & Noble Classic series. I personally have been buying Barnes & Noble Classics for a very long time. I love how affordable they are, the size print, so I find them easy to read, but I also enjoy, like, all the history I gave you, I got from this book. So I like that they give a pretty detailed introduction and information about the authors, as well as sometimes some historical context with timeline. So I'm a fan of the Barnes & Noble Classic series for that reason, but they're also super affordable. So that's why I have this copy. According to its copyright page, this is an 1869 translation of the children's and household stories. And something else I found interesting while I was perusing through the copyright is that the illustrations throughout the book are also from a Grimm brother, one of their younger brothers, Ludwig Emil. So all brothers Grimm throughout this book, story and illustrations, which is pretty cool. Something I find interesting because these are public domain stories. So what this means is that that's why there's so many translations, retellings, reimaginings, and that's why Disney could so easily use this story to create their very popular first animated feature.
Yeah, it makes sense that he would take it from there. I know when we were discussing doing this, I was like, wait, but which Snow White do we use as our source?
Yeah.
Like, we've tried to sync up on getting, like, the same edition of Winnie the Pooh or Mary Poppins. I'm like, this one is all over the place. But Emily found a great deal. I'm not sure if the sale is still going on, but Barnes & Noble Classics were marked down from $10 to $5. So we stocked up on some other classics as well for the podcast. A little plug there for Barnes & Noble. Not sponsored, of course. Just us spreading the good news. But let's talk about the story format itself. It was kind of shorter than I anticipated. I think in the edition, I believe I counted, it was 8 pages total from start to finish. Maybe not including one of the illustrations. Probably took about 15 minutes to read. It reads like a classic fairy tale. I was happy to see that it started with Once Upon a Time, as many of them are apt to do. Do you have any other notes on, like, the style of it?
It definitely sounds like a narrator, like a very classic, like you said, fairy tale narrator. Like you can almost picture someone sitting down and just orally telling the story without a book in front of them and passing the story down generation to generation. And in that way, that's why I think we're going to talk about the details that are in this, but I think that's why it's also not as detailed. Like, you don't get a lot of character description or things like that because it is passed down. So telling a bedtime story or a story around a fire or with family and friends, you're not going to go for more than 15 minutes. So I think it was what I expected, but I liked it.
Nice.
So what were your overall impressions of the original story? Something that stood out to you?
I just didn't expect it to move so quickly, but like you said, like when I thought about it, I was like, wait, but yeah, if people are passing these stories down, it's not going to take that long. I know we'll get more into the differences of Disney versus the classic fairy tale, but just here I wanted to point out, like, the pacing is obviously much different for a 73-minute film, but I was reading and I realized I'm like a page and a half in and she's already at the dwarf's cottage and like cleaning up and everything. And when I was watching the movie after I read it, I started taking notes and I was like, okay, she encounters the huntsman about 8 minutes in. She shows up at their house 15 minutes in. I'm like, okay, maybe this was faster than I remembered. But the dwarfs don't show up on screen until 21 minutes in, and she does not meet the dwarfs until 35 minutes into the film. Like, you don't see them together until that point. So for me,
and that's about halfway through the movie.
Yeah, at that point. I mean, I think it's between 70 and 80 minutes. So I was like, oh, gotta draw it out a little more. But overall, felt like a classic fairy tale to me. It has all of those elements. We'll get more into some of the plot points, but I enjoyed reading it. It was nice to see the source.
A fun observation I had was actually, like, right off the bat on page 1. I think one of the most, I see this all the time in Disney trivia, like, questions or what people like to ask is, what does the magic mirror say? Or, sorry, evil queen, what does she say to the mirror? And everyone says, mirror, mirror on the wall. And they're like, no, it's magic mirror on the wall, which is the Disney quote from the film.
Yeah.
However, in this version of the original fairy tale, it is mirror, mirror on the wall. So who's wrong?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Is
I guess
anyone really wrong?
if it's Disney trivia, they're wrong. But if it's just general trivia, I think you could certainly make the case.
But I found that so interesting, and I wonder why. I guess the language that Disney wanted to portray, like, it's magical, they wanted to get that word magic in there.
Yeah.
Whereas in the fairy tale, I think they introduce it as a magic mirror. So since you get that narration and that context in a book that you don't always get in a film, she has to say magic mirror on the wall. Whereas in the book,
they say she has a magic mirror.
Right. And then she goes, oh, mirror, mirror. So found that fun. I had to chuckle to myself when I read that because I'm like, I always hear that all the time in the parks or Disney trivia. Just everyone brings that up.
I think one of the interesting things that always comes up as I've like read different things about fairy tales or their history is really how dark some of these stories are, and that you wouldn't expect. Like, you think, oh, they're for children, happy little bedtime story. But a lot of fairy tales, including this one, are famous for their darker moments. So let's talk about some of that.
Yeah, and I think we've had this trend of talking about how different children's stories were back then to now. We even said this with Winnie the Pooh, that some of those themes were a lot more mature than we would expect for a younger audience. So I think that just is a change in culture more than expectations. Our expectations have changed.
I don't know, though. Winnie the Pooh wasn't eating people's hearts.
That's true. So that was something that was
dark,
different.
It's real dark. Yeah, I'll say. Go ahead and say the evil queen in the Disney film, the huntsman, can't kill Snow White, and so kind of off screen it's implied like he ends up killing a boar's heart, and he gives the queen a heart because that's what she's asked for. Here it describes he kills it, he comes back with the heart and the tongue, she asked for both, and the queen eats what she thinks is Snow White's heart and tongue. And I was like, oh, that got real dark because that was again like page 2.
Yeah, so that was a little much. You're just like, oh, okay. But I think fairy tales back then, we think more fairy tales now of like, oh, the princess being swept off her feet, which this has. But I think fairy tales then also had that element of horror that's kind of more like that Walt Whitman Ichabod Crane, where it's not like scary, but it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
Like, you can tell just how evil she is just by her actions of like, she's going to eat a human heart and a tongue to prove that she's the most beautiful and fairest of them all. So interesting note on what we said with different versions, because I was checking what some different differences are between Grimm's versions. In other ones, it's the lungs and liver.
Oh, that's
which I don't know if they wanted like
deeper.
The alliteration, but yeah.
Gotta get. I'm
still
just
going.
Picturing someone's lungs. Come on.
Yeah, so that one says lungs and liver. So I thought that was interesting, but I think heart is a little more dramatic.
Yeah.
To me, not that I like that someone's eating a heart, but I think if we're going for a little bit of horror in this story, I think heart is a little bit more dramatic than lungs.
Yeah.
Some other things, they try to kill Snow White 3 times. That's a big difference, but also we see a little bit more witchcraft with that. So I think that's more of that darkness as well. People
more
were scared of witches.
Enchantment. So she like has this bodice where she laces her up and she can't breathe, but then all the dwarfs have to do is untie it, and Snow White's fine. So she's like, okay, I'm gonna get something a little more foolproof, and poisons a comb for her to put in her hair, and so that's the enchanted. And then of course what we all think of Snow White and the apple, that iconic piece.
And she even tries to prove, just so that she kind of takes it a step further than Disney does, she proves to Snow White that it's not something that will kill her, because by the 3rd time Snow's catching on a little bit, like,
okay,
I don't think I should buy your apple. But she's like, look, I'll eat a piece too, and she eats the core, but the story says, oh, by the way, the core wasn't poisoned, just the external part.
This is mean, but she's kind of dumb. I had this discussion with my friend Leanne, and Leanne listens. She was in town with her mother and her sister, and I was walking around Epcot with them, and I was telling her that like we were going to record that this week, and she was like, I took a children's literature fairy tale class in college, and she was like, the thing that I remember is Snow White was dumb because the dwarves tell her, like, don't let anyone come in, and then, you know, she gets all laced up. They're like, okay, but like, don't talk to strangers, don't let anyone in the house. And it happens again, and then a third time, and you're like, girl, just listen to them, stranger danger.
Well, that kind of leads into what I wanted to talk about next was, do you think that is some sort of, fairy tales are known for their themes and morals, so do you think they're trying to get at something here about women?
I can definitely see, like, I feel like we see it a lot in fairy tales, is the danger of strangers, like, certainly with, like, Red Riding Hood talking to the wolf along the way. Like, I think we see that with the witch coming as, like, a peddler to the home. But I also think, like, the apple, when I hear that symbolism, it makes me think of, like, Adam and Eve, and, you know, she eats the apple in the garden, Snow White having that same exact kind of imagery. I mean, it doesn't unlock knowledge for her, but certainly has its repercussions.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Disney goes a little bit more biblical now that you say that, when they say it's a wishing apple. Here it's not a wishing apple. It's just, oh, here, I have a really nice juicy apple. So I think when you make that comparison to Adam and Eve, that Disney went a little bit more that route. Like, if you eat this, a wish will come true.
It's very temptation. Whereas here she's just like, do you want this apple? It's pretty. Are you hungry? Okay. But when I was watching the Disney film, you get that element where Grumpy's like, now don't let anyone in the house. So she's much more hesitant on screen to let the witch in, but then the witch is like, oh, my heart. Like, she's frightened or Fane's being frightened because the animals know what's up and they're like swirling around her. So Snow White lets her in, but Snow White's like, I don't know that I want to take this. And that's when she's like really selling it, like, one bite and your dreams will come true. Like, oh, I know you have a crush on someone. And then she's like, okay.
Well, I think, though, in the Disney film, we're kind of jumping ahead to differences, but whatever.
There's plenty.
I think with the Disney film, though, because they only try to kill her one time, you just see that she's just such a good-natured person. Like, the first time when the queen comes in the original tale with the stays and she gets bound real tight, she's taking advantage of her good nature. She's, I'm a poor peddler woman. I just want to make a living. And she and Snow White have a very good conversation. Snow White's like, oh, I'm not threatened by you. Let me help you. So we get that in the Disney film, but in the original tale, it's like by round 3, you're like, seriously?
Girl, no.
Girl.
So I think one of the themes might be like her naiveness throughout. Like, she's very young. I have questions. How old is she? Because the only time they mention in the Grimm story is that she's 7, or like, you know, she had reached that point. But then I'm like, did time pass and she's older? Like, I'm kind of uncomfortable that the prince is taking her to be married and she gets married. I'm like, but is she 7?
No, she's not 7. So some stuff I read is that she's actually older than Disney made her at 14. She's supposed to be like 16.
Disney never says she's actually 14, even though that has been like, right. I didn't find that in my own research. But it is like, she's widely accepted within the Disney canon to be 14. But I just thank you for clearing that up, because I was like, is she 7? I don't know. I'm uncomfortable.
So some stuff I read said she's in her teens, but like 16. So like your typical fairy tale age.
It just doesn't say that. The only time they mention her age is when she's 7. I was like, I'm just going to assume for my own comfort that time has passed, and that was just like a throwaway line about when she started to come into her beauty and be seen as a threat by the evil queen.
Yeah. So I want to continue some themes a little bit, particularly that women's roles, because when she does meet the dwarves, and, you know, she tells them her story of, I need a place to stay. I think in the Disney, well, even in the Disney film, the dwarves are sympathetic, but they're like, well, if you want to stay here, can you do our cooking, our cleaning, make the bed? Like, they were really demanding more about that, I think, in the original tale than in the film. So in this original tale, they're like, well, if you want to stay here and you want our protection, you need to they like lay out a contract. Like, we want our meals cooked. We want the house clean. And so like she becomes like this wife to 7 little dwarfs. But it's like pretty adamant. And she's like, oh, absolutely. So I think, in that time, like you're protected by being in the home. Maybe something they're also trying to point out to young girls, like don't talk to strangers. Your husband knows best, in this case, the dwarves. And this is what you're supposed to be doing. That's what guarantees you your protection. So I see that theme. Granted, we are in a much more contemporary time. So that's what I see coming out of this fairy tale. I was just a little shocked by like how bossy the dwarves were about it. They're like, you're going to do our cooking and cleaning. Whereas in the film, they seem a little more sympathetic, like, oh, sure, you can stay here, but would you mind helping us?
Well, and she kind of just, like, comes in and cleans the place already. Like, she shows up, they're not home. She's like, it's dirty. I'm gonna clean it all up.
Right. I think in the film, she's a little bit more, I don't want to say independent, but she takes more things on by herself. She's like, oh, I will do this for you. She's not as subservient. She makes a couple more things on her own choices. But overall, I saw that reinforcing women's role, the role of strangers, but then beauty and vanity, of course, comes through.
Oh, yeah.
Fairest of them all.
And the queen's consistently trying to be better, and she's punished in the end, ultimately. Another theme within fairy tales is, like, good will triumph, and evil will be punished.
Another biblical reference to deadly sins, vanity. But it's still noted that Snow White is beautiful, very beautiful, but beautiful inside and out.
There's the key.
Yeah, so some, I think, very classic fairy tale morals and themes here.
Did you have any favorite or least favorite parts as you were reading it? I know it's only 8 pages, but anything jump out to you?
Favorite parts? I don't know if anything really stuck out to me as like being really my favorite. I just really enjoyed the 3 times that they came to kill her and they couldn't. So I found that not necessarily like a favorite, but like kind of entertaining because it's so different than what we're used to from the original tale.
My favorite was for a similar reason, was like, not like, I really enjoyed that part of the story, but like the language itself and its descriptions just made me chuckle. It's 2 pieces. I'm going to like say the one and then we'll discuss and then I'll pause. But it's when the prince discovers her. So, again, we're getting into our Disney differences. The prince is not at the beginning of this tale. He does not meet her until she's in her coffin, essentially. So it says, for a long time, Snow White lay peacefully in her case and changed not, but looked as if she were only asleep. For she was still white as snow, red as blood, and black-haired as ebony. By and by it happened that a king's son was traveling in the forest and came to the dwarf's house to pass the night. He soon perceived the glass case upon a rock and the beautiful maiden lying within, and he read also the golden inscription. When he had examined it, he said to the dwarfs, let me have this case, and I will pay you what you like for it. But the dwarfs replied, we will not sell it for all the gold in the world. Then give it to me, said the prince, for I cannot live without Snow White. I will honor and protect her so long as I live. And that just, I was like, wow, that escalated really quickly. It made me think of Into the Woods, if you've seen it. This prince is in there, and the whole song about agony, making fun of the trope of them like meeting and falling in love instantly, and I must have her.
And she's dead.
And she's dead. And I also thought of, if you've seen Inside Out,
yes,
it takes place in a 12-year-old girl, Riley's mind, and she has that, like, imaginary boyfriend. He's like, I love Riley. I would die for her. And I keep saying, I'm like, that's Riley's boyfriend. I will honor and protect her. And then immediately after, again, very interesting difference. Here's what I'm going to go into. When the dwarfs saw he was so much in earnest, they pitied him, and at last gave him the case, and the prince ordered it to be carried away on the shoulders of one of his attendants. Presently it happened that they stumbled over a rut, and with the shock the piece of poisoned apple which lay in Snow White's mouth fell out. Very soon opened her eyes, and raising the lid of the glass case, she rose up and asked, where am I? So it's not a true love's kiss. I just picture them like they trip. The apple comes out of her throat, and she's like, oh, hey guys, what's up? What I missed?
I love how so matter-of-factly some of these things are. Like, oh, the stays, and they're like, untie them, she's safe. Oh, the comb, take it out of her hair. Oh, she's safe. The apple. Oh, she was just choking on a piece the entire time. Like, they're so matter-of-factly and like,
yes.
Actually, by the way, this is, you just like hear someone in your ear who like has to point out things to you that's like, no, actually, but wait, but it seems that way.
It was my favorite because it just made me laugh and smile reading it. Did you have anything that was like a least favorite?
I actually really did not like the ending. I felt like it was very abrupt. But then the piece that also got me was, so this is how they get back at the queen. She puts on these iron shoes that are red hot that she has to dance the night away until they burn her and she dies. Which, very, again, dark, kind of typical of.
And that happens at her wedding to the prince. So, like, the queen is still alive at this point.
Right, she hears about the wedding, doesn't know it's Snow White, so she's like shocked to see, or like she hears that Snow White was alive, so she's like, I don't want to go, but I want to go, I want to know. And then the dwarves recognize her and punish her, but they don't say too much about it. It just kind of happens. So
it just ends very abruptly. I don't know if you want to read
Yeah, I was gonna
starting with the mirror.
By chance, the old mother-in-law of Snow White was also invited to the wedding, and when she was dressed in all her finery to go, she first stepped in front of her mirror and asked, "O mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?" And it replied, "Thou wert the fairest, O lady queen. The princess bride is more fair, I ween." At these words, the old queen was in fury, and was so terribly mortified that she knew not what to do with herself. At first, she resolved not to go to the wedding, but she could not resist the wish for a sight of the young queen, and as soon as she entered, she recognized Snow White, and was so terrified with rage and astonishment that she remained rooted to the ground. Just then a pair of red-hot iron shoes were brought in with a pair of tongs and set before her, and these she was forced to put on and to dance in them till she fell down dead.
And then it just ends. The end.
Right, but just abruptly, she saw her, oh my goodness, that's Snow White. And then, oh, here, put on these shoes and die.
And you're dead. And there's no, and they lived happily ever after. Nope.
I wanted more of who ordered the shoes. Who recognized her? No one's actually, other than Snow White, seen the queen, but...
Well, I guess she was invited. It said
right,
that
so
she was invited
I
to
guess
the wedding.
Was
this Snow White's,
But I think this is where those retellings and retranslations that... This is translated out of German from the 19th century, so who knows intent in... I did not study German linguistics. I took French in high school. But who knows what the intent was when Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm were writing this. So who knows if our translation is correct, but also the constant retellings and revisions that they made to their stories. I wonder if, the dwarves' motivations or some other pieces that connected her getting to the wedding and then getting into the shoes was lost. It just feels disconnected to me, but I wonder if it just disappeared over, years of revisions, that public domain of being able to be retold and rewritten over and over.
Yep. I'm curious. I'd like to go back just on my own time and kind of maybe look how others end. Because I agree. That was weird to me. I was like, and it's over? Okay.
Right. And I think the dwarves, from other reading I did, doesn't say in this version, but the dwarves made the shoes, which makes sense because they're miners. So they would know how to work iron to do that. So I think I found that from other reading online about other versions.
And they recognize, who someone is after her and probably piece it together that it's her wicked stepmother that she ran away from.
They're the only ones that know that they tried to kill her 3 times. So they've got motive.
They're like, don't do this again, because don't even try it. Don't even think about it.
But yeah, so I think that was the only part that I least liked. Everything else felt decently connected. Not a lot of detail or description, but the ending for me was just a little haphazard, but I think that is, like I said, due to revisions and translations. So one other observation I kind of want to make, and I want to see if you had the same feeling.
I did. I'm sorry, I'm looking at your notes, but go ahead and say it.
Yeah, so when Snow White gets to their house, gets to the cottage, the way she's walking around it and looking at things, and then when the dwarves come back and notice some differences in their cottage, I got total Goldilocks and the Three Bears vibes. It sounded exactly the same. So, all right, so here's the part where she comes into the house. So this is a little long, but think Goldilocks and Three Bears here. In this cottage, everything was very small, but more neat and elegant than I can tell you. In the middle stood a little table with a white cloth over it, and 7 little plates upon it, each plate having a spoon, a knife, and a fork, and there were also 7 little mugs. Against the wall were 7 little beds arranged in a row, each covered with snow white sheets. Little Snow White, being both hungry and thirsty, ate a little morsel of porridge out of each plate and drank a drop or two of wine out of each glass, for she did not wish to take away the whole share of anyone. After that, because she was so tired, she laid herself down on one bed, but it did not suit. She tried another, but that was too long. The fourth was too short, a fifth too hard, but the seventh was just the thing, and tucking herself up in it, she went to sleep, first commending herself to God. So we have it's too hot, too cold, just right, too soft, too firm, just right. And then even the dwarves, when they come back in, they're like the three little bears. The first asked, "Who has been sitting on my chair?" The second, "Who has been eating off my plate?" The third said, "Who has been nibbling at my bread?" The fourth, "Who has been at my porridge?" And so on and so forth. And they notice all these differences about someone's been sleeping in my bed. It looks like someone's been sleeping in my bed. And I just was like, this is Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
I wrote that down in my own notes as I was reading. I put, tries beds like Goldilocks. Too hard, too short, just right. So just funny little aside, like those common things throughout fairy tales.
Yeah, so now I'm kind of curious. I haven't looked up to see where Goldilocks' origins come from, but I'm curious if that's also a story that's circulating at the same time that, like you said, those common themes that just spread throughout all fairy tales.
I would think so, because I feel like a lot of it is between like the 18th and 19th century that they really like come to popularity. So that would make sense to me. Anything else on this story before we get more into the Disney comparison?
I think we're ready for the Disney comparison. We just keep jumping to it.
We've been talking about it a little bit. We've kind of gone over some of the differences there. Was there anything else you don't think we missed? I think we touched on the prince isn't at the beginning. The ending is very different in that like the queen is kind of punished in a different way in the Disney film. She falls off a cliff as the old hag. Much shorter, different pacing, the not killing 3 times. Anything else that jumped out to you?
I think those are most of the main differences. I think pretty much Disney stuck to it.
Yeah, and I think he keeps the integrity of the original story. So what he does is kind of plus it in a way for those 73 or so minutes.
Because, yeah, how do you take an 8-page story or 15-minute bedtime story and turn it into an hour? So definitely I think the basic Disney's, there's songs, there's characters.
Yeah,
so
can we talk about songs for a moment?
Yes, let's do.
Okay, so that was something I had in my notes from my research. I was watching, again, as I always do, one of the DVD bonus features. They're just such a great resource, and I find like most of the time I just like watch my movies, but I'm like, I should really go into the bonus features because Disney does a great job producing them. And
I'm guilty of not watching the bonus features. I really need to start doing that.
Okay. They go into a little bit about the music, and a few of the historians that they have speak kind of say that this is really the first musical. So they say that like musicals at that time, both in Broadway and Hollywood, were more like musical reviews. So just like taking popular songs or just like breaking into song for the sake of a song, not exactly addressing a plot point or moving the plot forward.
Okay.
Like Snow White does. So she sings her song, and it's where she meets the prince. She's singing the song as she's cleaning, and like these actions move the plot forward. So it's integrating song lyrics within the story and context. So people brought up that like in terms of Broadway, Rodgers and Hammerstein were really the ones who like propelled that forward with their classics like Oklahoma and Carousel. But then someone's like, yeah, that gets a lot of credit, but like really so Oklahoma premiered in 1943. Walt did it 5 years earlier.
I never really thought of it that way.
Yeah, I just, we both love musicals. So
yes.
I'm like, I just take musicals for granted, and these are what musicals are and what they do. But I was like, oh, that's like really cool to think about in terms of that. So yes, the music is a big part of expanding this story. Like there's songs every few minutes or so. Like, I kind of forgot how much music there was in this film.
And then also in general, like that's something that you can't necessarily do in text. So like in text, you've seen songs like written out. Like when we did Ichabod Crane, he had little tunes that he hummed, and Walt Whitman wrote out what the lyrics would be, but you can read that in 2 seconds. you just skim through it, or you read it and 2 minutes later you're done, or not even. So with song and having that instrumental, you get something different on screen than you do reading. And I think same goes with the setting and the action. So like them describing Snow White running through the forest and being scared, that only took 3 or 4 sentences in the story, but some of his most iconic screen or scenery work in Snow White is when she's running through the forest and the trees have those evil looking eyes, and it's very dark and it's very scary for 1939. I think there's stories of kids like getting scared, screaming, leaving the theater because they were scared by it. So, but they can give 3 or 4 minutes of Snow White going through the forest and then
building the tension.
Right, building more tension with the help of music. And then also the woodland creatures, little friends that make for the cute gags.
Yeah, and I will say I had kind of talked about this too, that Walt Studio was known for the gags at the time with the Mickey Mouse shorts, but they wanted this to have more heart, and it does, and it has a narrative. But gags are definitely a big part of this. And something fun that came up again in that piece was you have some of those iconic animators that we've talked about in different stories with Marty Sklar. He's not an animator, but he knew many of these men and talked about them in his Imagineering thing, or of course in the Bob Thomas biography. But like people like Mark Davis, Ollie Johnson, Frank Thomas, they shared that they did want this to still have gags in it, so they enticed animators to come up with different gags, offering $5 to $10 per gag if it was used in the film. So like that was kind of like an enticing offer for them, and they said that that was about like $87 now. So like, yeah, people were churning out, coming up with those ideas to
but
have
they're
them. And
sweet gags. They're not like slapsticky.
No, not anything. No,
like it's a very different type of
funny
gag.
And lighthearted to keep audiences engaged and laughing. Ward Kimball in the short shares that he came up with the gag where they all find Snow White in the bed and then like their noses pop up over the bedpost one by one. So he got $5 for that.
So I like how the gags in this are a little bit more realistic. Like a squirrel would pop his nose over a bed frame. It's not like the Mickey mini gags where, you know, tails are turning into stairs or like inanimate objects are turning into other things. So it's a little bit more realistic kind of gags.
Like the recurring one is the little turtle, and he's so slow. Like they're all rushing to the house and they're rushing out, but the turtle's still coming in. Or again, he's going
up the stairs.
Yeah.
Those little things. I like when they use his stomach as a washboard when they're cleaning. There's so many gags in that cleaning scene. The whistle while you work. So
I think the other big piece that really adds the heart is, of course, the character development of the dwarves themselves.
Yes.
I mean, in the fairy tale, they're essentially nameless, interchangeable. They're kind of they move together as a unit. Like, and the dwarves
and they don't have names. There's
no
names. And Disney had that brilliant idea of name them their personality. Happy is happy.
Well,
grumpy is grumpy.
Will say there was a 1912 Broadway play, and they did name the dwarves in the play, but it's not like the personality traits as you're saying. It was more just like cutesy, rhymey names.
Yeah, and I think that adds to the gag level as well, that you know what to expect from them, but it's like overly personified of how bashful is or how sneezy is. And you can use those personality traits again to draw out the story, but also build on the character. Like they get their own song for washing their hands before eating. Not essential to the plot at all, but super enjoyable and extended the length of the film and the story.
Do you have a favorite dwarf?
Okay, so there's a couple answers for this. Dopey.
There's 7, so don't pick 7.
Well, I'm not saying all 7. So my mom's absolute favorite character is Dopey. She loves Dopey, which is funny because she's a speech pathologist and he's mute. So that was always like kind of an ironic thing. Both of her favorite characters are mute. She loves Dopey and Dumbo. They're her favorite.
And they start with D.
Yeah, but neither of them talk. So I always thought that was funny that she teaches people how to talk, but her favorite characters don't talk. So she loves Dopey. So I've just always had a soft spot for Dopey because how much my mom loves him. Like any new Dopey merch is out, she's for it. She is like over the moon about meeting Dopey. She's meeting them at Storybook Dining. Is that what it is?
Oh, is she going to the Storybook Dining at Artist Point?
So she was like, I have to get it because Dopey's there. So
yeah.
So Dopey's always kind of been a soft spot in our family. But in my Disney College program, Snow White was a regular in our apartment between shifts or after work. And with 6 of us living in the apartment, we all got assigned a dwarf, essentially based off our personalities. And I was told that I'm Doc.
Okay.
Because I'm a teacher. Just my traits about me. I'm very type A. So I kind of got Doc. I'm like, I was, quote, also mom of my roommates.
I always much the leader and taking care of them.
Yeah, so I got Doc. So I have a soft spot for Doc because of my program. My friend even got me the Funko Pop Doc figurine.
Oh, nice.
Sits on my bookshelf.
I really like Bash, though.
Oh, he's so
I just think he's so cute. Like, when he turns bright red, I feel like you see more interactions with him than, like, maybe Sneezy or Happy. Like, the only thing you can do with Sneezy is he sneezes.
Yeah.
Like, there's a few gags with that, but I feel like you see some more from Bashful, and I just like how shy he is.
He's like, oh.
And he just seems so sweet. Like, I'll just sit here with you. We don't have to talk. We'll just enjoy each other's company.
Yeah. Some of my favorite gags from the dwarves, going with Dopey, I love when he leaves the key on the hook.
Yes.
And it's just like, the whole point is to lock them up, Dopey, but this is why you're Dopey. Oh, Dopey. And then the gems in his eyes, and they really play up Dopey.
They do.
Is it Festival of Fantasy where he's, quote, sitting on top of Sneezy and he's like the tall dwarf?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's just such a great scene. I think that's my favorite scene in the movie, is that song, the silly song with the dancing. I love the animation in it. The scenery is gorgeous. And I just like those little gags that they have in there. And you get to see every dwarf featured. So I think that's my favorite part of the film.
The dwarves are really the heart of the film. Like, I'd be interested, I didn't calculate this, but like the screen time ratio between the dwarves versus Snow White.
Yeah, and they're the true saviors. Character. Even though the prince wakes her up, they stop the queen or the witch, the hag at the time, they stop her. It's kind of almost reminiscent of Sleeping Beauty, where the Disney adaptation, even though it's called Sleeping Beauty, the fairies are like the main character.
Yes, she's only in it for 18 minutes. I wrote a paper about Disney princesses when we were in college, and I remember finding out that fact. I was like, oh my god, she's not in this movie, and it's her movie, but it's really not when you think about it. I think Snow White certainly has more screen time than her, but it's very much they use the dwarves and fully develop them for that character side. Another fun thing from my bonus features was there was a little short with Don Hahn, who is the executive producer of classics like Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, pretty much a lot of our childhood. They had him introduce this feature, and this was kind of a proposed sequel called Snow White Returns, and they uncovered story sketches within the Disney Animation Research Library. Ooh, I know. I'm like, this is right up your alley with archives and stuff. And they're like, we don't really know a lot about this, but they've kind of come to the consensus that, like the dwarves were popular characters. It's continuing with that, but it wouldn't have been a feature length sequel, more of like a short film. So kind of going back to their roots, but they were using some unused footage of animation that was deleted for time. If you ever look up, there's a scene where they're building a bed for Snow White, or they're eating soup that she's made. So to kind of...
I've heard of the soup one.
Yeah.
There's like a whole song for that.
Yes, that's also... Again, your bonus features are your friends. To tie those together, it's like kind of the idea like Snow White has gone off and married the prince, but a bird comes and delivers a letter and says like, hey guys, I'm coming back to visit. Be there tomorrow. So they're trying to like prep for her. So they're building her this bed. Then she shows up and she's like, I made you guys soup. So they go to bring her the bed that they've built in the woods. But of course, the gag is they forgot to cut down one of the bedpost trees. So it's like stuck to the tree. And eventually they get it back to the house, but she's fallen asleep on their bed, and that's kind of the end. But it was really cute because they had fully like sketched out the storyboard for this. So they integrated the animation from those cutscenes that were developed, but he showed all the storyboards and kind of told the story. So I think that really speaks to like the development of the dwarves and how strong of characters they were, that they considered making a whole short just to bring them back.
I wonder what stopped it. If it was like the Walt idea of you can't top pigs with pigs, he didn't want to do the same thing again, even though they developed stuff, or he got caught up with Fantasia and was going a whole new direction.
Well, and I'd say we've talked about this within the Walt biography. You know, this is 1937. We're not too many years away from America entering World War II. So I feel like a lot of stuff was stalled and put kind of in development until after the war, when we get Bambi and Dumbo. Like, some of that had already been started before. So I'm thinking timeline-wise, it probably just got shelved, never to resurface until they found it in the library. So, well, fun stuff. I really enjoyed my bonus features this time around.
I know. I need to. What's hard is all my DVDs, since they're a family collection, they're all in New Jersey.
Oh, no.
Because my mom likes to remind me that they're hers, that I borrow. So I haven't been very good at borrowing like in bulk. So I only have like a couple, but I need to like borrow more in bulk of the Disney collection that we have back home.
Our family collection was back on like VHS. And
I
maybe,
remember
like, a few
that.
on DVDs. Yes, it was in my college apartment. Good times. So then now as an adult, Jug and I have collected all of the Disney animated features on Blu-ray. So we have them on the Apple TV with the digital codes. The only ones we're missing are not in print on Blu-ray, and that is Fantasia and Fantasia 2000 are in the vault, and they've never released 2 of the package films, Make Mine Music and Melody Time. So those are the only Disney movies we're missing for the Walt Disney Studio animation. So that is where my extensive bonus feature life comes from.
I need to get on that bonus feature life. But anyway, back to our Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah, sorry, that was quite a tangent.
But relevant at the same time.
It was. There was. I learned
so
a
kind of
lot.
leading into this darkness as well as the plussing. I think Disney really took the darkness of Grimm's fairy tales a little bit further. They really play on the magic. So like they talk about the queen disguising herself as an old peddler woman and poisoning these different objects, but that was like the extent of the magic as well as the mirror. But that was like it. Whereas Disney, she's got potions. She completely changes her appearance. She's got a whole dungeon. Like they really play up the witch. I love that meme of her swinging her cape. That's like me in my house.
With my robes. The other one is when she's the old hag and she's like laughing, going into her little trapdoor. That is a classic.
Oh, is it like when you tell your friends you have other plans, but really you're just gonna go lay in bed?
And you're like, hey, 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 hey.
She is very meme worthy. Disney had no idea what he was creating back in
Great.
1939.
She's a good villain.
She's a great villain.
But the disguise and transformation I also found was a similarity for the 1912 Broadway play. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if Walt ever saw this play, but definitely there's some similarities there. But I would agree that it does take those dark elements. It does not shy away from that. We talked about it a little earlier with her going through the woods. Like that is a scary scene for sure. The trees with eyes and everything.
Yeah, the hag falling off a cliff, I think is a little more dramatic than the iron shoes. I mean, depending on how they would have chosen to animate that, but it's more mysterious. I think the iron shoes would have been a little too graphic, maybe. But still, falling off a cliff and seeing her get smaller, and then the vultures circling, like that's kind of menacing. It's like, ooh,
it is.
So there's definitely that.
But it's
darkness.
A tasteful off-screen death, as always.
And I think he gets a lot of credit. A lot of people from different podcasts and stories I've read from reviews about Snow White is people credit that Walt wasn't afraid to be dark, and that we're kind of in a different age of stories we share with children, that's a lot more acceptable, or like how he illustrated it was a little more dark than how maybe there'd be more innuendos today about her falling off a cliff or something. Although we get Mother Gothel falling out of...
I feel like a lot of Disney villains fall to their death. Like, if you were to really sit down...
That's true.
...and make a list, which we don't need to do right now, but think on it.
That's true. But they all, like, disappear in a puff of smoke or dust, or you don't see it.
Yeah, the vultures is pretty dark.
Yeah, the adding of the vultures, I think, makes it...
They're like, we're not going to show you her body, but just so you know she's dead.
And the vultures are going to go eat her. Because that's what they do. So, yeah, kind of dark. So playing off of those themes, so I think that keeps the integrity of a true Grimm fairy tale. Even the name Grimm just suggests,
true.
darkness.
True. Would you say that some of the same themes are present?
I think the vanity one of being too vain has its comeuppance at the end. I think that they also highlight that irony, though, of the queen is so vain, but she's willing to transform into something ugly or to protect her vanity. But I think with that screen adaptation, you get that that image more clearly than in reading it. Any other themes that you saw?
No, I think those are probably the big ones there. I mean, it is essentially the same story. Really, the stuff that's more developed is for the sake of the art of film. I wouldn't say that any of that was, like, thematically driven.
I agree. One theme I saw in people's writing is that the dwarves emphasize teamwork. Heigh ho, it's off to work we go. The need for, and, that kind of makes sense. We're in the Great Depression, or towards the end of the Great Depression, that industriousness. It's fun to go to work. It's nice to go to work. So kind of playing off of, reassuring people's fears about jobs. So some teamwork. So I think you get more of that because you see the dwarves more at work in the film then. So I think that was one theme that they saw highlighted, but I think that's in the historic context of when this film was produced. But yeah, the whole female thing that I think we got more strongly out of this book. I mean, she's still rescued by a prince and swept off her feet,
yeah,
but
that's mostly.
I don't think Disney's making any commentary in this film about, to be protected, you have to make the beds, clean the house, the food, the way the dwarves were kind of driving a little bit more in the text. So I don't think those themes stuck out as much, but I think the thing about vanity was the big.
I would agree. It's very much like played up with the strong personality of that villain, who's also more developed. Favorite part of the film?
So I told you mine already, the dancing scene with the organ just before, I think that's like almost the climax. So that's when everything's still okay. And then right after is the scene, the queen going into her dungeon, swinging her robes to become the evil hag. So it's like, I like to highlight that turn in the story, but I just love that scene so much of them singing and dancing.
I like when she comes to the cottage, and I love Whistle While You Work, and then all the birds and the deer and everything are helping her clean the house. I just think that's such a cute scene. And like that's so iconic. Like that's what they make fun of in Enchanted.
Yeah.
When Giselle has like all the city rats and different city dwelling animals like in the apartment, the pigeons cleaning the house. Like that was definitely a strong nod to this scene. And I think I like Whistle While You Work. Like it's just such a nice little like mantra too. Kind of like a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down from Mary Poppins, very much in that vein.
Yeah, I like how all these songs are they're catchy, they're hummy, but then Someday My Prince Will Come is just so iconic.
Oh, true.
How she sings that is just beautiful and very, very fairy tale, being rescued by her prince. But least favorite parts?
I guess the woods part probably scared me as a kid.
Yeah.
I don't like have a traumatizing memory, but I feel like that was probably intense for me. But this time around, I don't think anything I was like, oh, I'd cut that. Because the movie's not that long.
Yeah, there's nothing to me that I was like, I don't like this.
Right. It moves along.
How do you feel about the ending of the movie compared to the text?
Oh, I like this much better. Like it's such a great shot of like the castle in the clouds and like that wide shot of her sitting on the horse next to the prince. Like that's iconic to me.
And I think I don't know, I think Walt popularized it, but it's a very classic fairy tale ending of True Love's Kiss Will Wake You. Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, because it wasn't in the book.
Yeah, Briar Rose Sleeping Beauty is Ingram's fairy tale, so these stories were circulating at the same time, but the first mass media produced feature-length film, Walt puts, the True Love's Kiss thing on stage.
Yeah, I wonder if that's in the film that he saw from 1916.
Oh, true. I don't know.
That time period. And that didn't come up in my reading, and it's not something that I had time to like go watch or try to track down that silent film, but I could see that maybe being in there, and that's where he got the idea.
And I like that the prince isn't like super bossy. He just sees her and he like is also paying his respects. He's not like, give me the girl and like steals her. He like is just paying his respects to someone he's like, oh, it's a shame such a beautiful girl passed away so tragically. I don't know what drives him to want to kiss her, but we're not going to go down that road. So overall, I like the ending better. But how do you think the film stands up today?
I think really what stood out to me is like artistically, like thinking about how long it took them to make this. Like this was made by hand, like artists putting this together. So certainly overall the whole film stands up. Like it is a classic and it is a very important part within Disney's history. Like this is really what launched the Disney studio outside of like their short realm. And if we didn't have Snow White, we wouldn't have so many things. Certainly it all started with a mouse, but another strong foundation is Snow White. But the art really stood out to me, and it had like very fairy tale influences. I'm also working another fun fact from my bonus features in
today.
Here.
You're working in all the fun facts instead of the puns.
I am. There was an artist, Gustav Tangerine, and I believe, because I remember struggling with that name, he came up in our Disney Golden Book podcast at some point.
Name's familiar.
So he was not an animator on this film, but created kind of like the production art to set the tone, the film, the color palette of this. And he's originally from Sweden, and he illustrated children's books. So that's why I feel like the look of this film very much feels like what you'd see in like an illustrated fairy tale book, like the little cottage and all of that. So he kind of like created some of like the inspirational sketches for the film specifically that the animators then took as they created the world.
That's awesome. I love the art in this as well. And I think just overall, though, not just because it's a classic, but as a film, it's still enjoyable. A lot of people enjoy just watching Snow White, not just because they're like, well, I have to, it's a classic, but because they genuinely like it. And I think that's why, not just because it's Walt's first, but we get so many, I'm transitioning here, I learned from you, Courtney, so many park and other Disney properties that use Snow White.
Nicely done.
Thank you. I'm learning. I'm getting there.
Yes, so let's jump into those. The first one has its roots from opening day at Disneyland, and that is Snow White's Scary Adventures, which is still at Disneyland, but definitely an RIP moment for that at Walt Disney World. I do remember riding that as a little girl, and it closed probably around 2012-ish, preparing for New Fantasyland. But Snow White's Scary Adventures.
It was scary.
Going back,
I remember being scared of it as like a 5-year-old. Like I still wrote it, but I remember like it was dark. It definitely played up the very dark elements of the film.
Yeah. And I think interestingly, I've heard this didn't come up in my research because we weren't focusing too much on the parks, but just from what I know, originally there was no animatronic of Snow White. Like the concept was you are Snow White and you are on her adventure.
Yeah, I've heard
like,
that
you
story.
You see the witch, you see the dwarves, but people are like, it's called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Where's Snow White? I'm a little scared. So to kind of ease that, they do have that figure of her dancing for like the Yodel song and some others. Like she's painted in the mural there. Something I had never heard of, but I was on the Disney A to Z portion of the D23 website and kind of like searching Snow White to find my facts, and I found Snow White, an enchanting new musical stage show, and this was a 28-minute adaptation of the film that opened in February 2004 at the Fantasyland Theater at Disneyland. If you've been to Disneyland, that is where Mickey and the Magical Map is currently, I believe, and it was an elaborate stage show produced exclusively for that theater. and it closed not too long after, like 2 years. But I'm thinking must have been in the same vein as like Beauty and the Beast live on stage or the Little Mermaid show at Disney's Hollywood Studios. So I had never known that they did a stage adaptation of that. And I'm like, that would have been
I
cute.
wonder if there's a YouTube video out there. I'm sure.
Oh, there has to be.
Because now I'm intrigued.
We should watch that just for fun.
I'm intrigued to see how those songs would translate onto the stage. Because while they do propel the story forward, most of them are only sung by Snow White. There's not like one by the dwarves, two by the dwarves, but like there's not a lot of like flip-flopping. So, and they're very short songs. They're not like these long, gorgeous ballads like everyone's favorite Let It Go that Disney likes to put on stage. So I'm curious to see how they would use that. It's not like your typical Alan Menken, Howard Ashman that you put on stage.
That's fair.
So that'd be curious. To wrap up Disneyland, we also have Snow White's Grotto, which I have not been to Disneyland, as we've discussed many times on the show, but that is near the castle, correct?
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it by that name, but I just kind of was like, it's the fountain. So there's a kind of like a waterfall, and there's statues of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs within this like wooded setting to the right of the castle if you're facing the castle, and her wishing well is there. But there is another wishing well at Epcot that's definitely hers. So if you're in the Germany pavilion, kind of right as you enter Germany to the left of the main building, you can meet Snow White there. And the cute little photo op is at her wishing well, which you can also just go up to the wishing well, after the meet and greets have ended for the day. It's still a cute picture spot.
Yeah, it's a very popular meet and greet, and she looks great in that location. It's very fitting, I think, with the woodland style. Just the way they designed the Germany pavilion, it looks like it's part of the movie. It fits, like you said, like the color aesthetics. That it's just a great spot. But sometimes you can meet her. Now and then I've seen her pop up on Main Street, where sometimes Princess Aurora meets every now and then. It's like where Santa sits.
I think lately it's been, yes, it is to the left of Town Square as you come in by the flagpole, right between Guest Relations, City Hall, and that Chamber of Commerce building. I believe I did see on the app that she was there the other day. So she is definitely around. If you've listened to the latest Mad Chatters podcast, I was on and discussed with the guys the history of different roller coasters, starting with the Matterhorn in Disneyland, all the way up to Slinky Dog Dash. And one of the newer ones in New Fantasyland is the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. So that kind of replaced Snow White's Scary Adventures in Walt Disney World in a way. But this is so cute because it takes you through the Seven Dwarfs mine. You have those really cool animatronics where their faces are projected, but you also have some classic animatronics because Emily's favorite scene with them dancing from the ride was recycled into that attraction. At the end, you end by the cottage and you can see them dancing through the window there.
And the witch looking in
yes,
also.
She always scares me. She's like,
you don't expect her. You don't see it until like you pass.
No, the first time I was like, oh.
You're like, oh, that was a pleasant little ending. Oh, what? There's a witch there? And then next thing you know, you're back inside the unloading area and you're like, you only saw her for a second. You're just like, oh my gosh, she's there. So I really like the ending of that attraction.
The newest offering, which you had mentioned your mom is doing, and it's definitely on my bucket list. I haven't searched for availability yet, but that is Storybook Dining at Artist's Point at Wilderness Lodge. So Storybook Dining there is at one of the sit-down restaurants, just kind of off of the lobby there. It was a signature dining experience, which is on the fancier realm, but they've updated it to have kind of an enchanted forest type theme. And it is a prefix menu, so you get a selection of appetizers, an entree, a dessert trio. And while you are dining there, you get a portrait with the evil queen. She's standing in a really cool photo spot, like with the magic mirror behind her. But who comes around to your table? But Snow White, Grumpy, and Dopey. So a nice way to meet those characters. You don't often see the dwarves out and about, but why don't you tell us where else we can meet our dwarf friends?
So a very famous meet and greet for the dwarves, which is a very popular meet and greet, is at Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party and Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party. They all 7 meet, and Courtney and I have done this. Very popular. So if you're a huge fan of the Seven Dwarves, like my mom, she can't believe that she hasn't met all 7 of them, and like that's on her list. She really wants to do that. It's really fun to meet all of them, and they're so cute. You can see their personifications of their character, and it's so much fun.
Yes, we're going to share the picture as we announce this episode. So you might have seen it if you follow our Instagram. But Emily dug up our 2015 photo with them, the one we're referencing from our Halloween party. And we both noticed, like, all the dwarfs are together, but Bashful's off to the side. Like, he's a little shy to be in the photo. I was like, oh, such good characterization.
I don't know how we missed that 3 years later. Like, how many times have I looked at that photo and shared that photo? And I never noticed that Vashel was standing off to the side.
We both noticed it, like, at the same time. Too cute. And Snow White being the original princess, she is certainly in a lot of parades. You mentioned Festival of Fantasy, but I feel like no matter what the parade is, at least she has a presence. I remember in the Main Street Electrical Parade, like, there was a whole unit with all the dwarves and the mine cars that would light up.
And I think they were also in, or at least the dwarves were, I think they were in also Spectral Magic somewhere.
They both blend together in my mind now. It's been a while since I've seen a nighttime parade.
Yeah, it's a little hard in my childhood to separate the two because I just remember flashy lights. But she's always in parades, and I don't think she normally gets like a float, but she's usually one of the like walking characters, like they all walk together as a unit, or she tends to be blended in with like Alice and like the Mod Podge.
In the Christmas and the Halloween parade, yeah, she's definitely in that walking unit of multiple characters.
So she's always there. And a more, not quite Disney, but Disney adaptation she is one of the main driving characters of the very popular Once Upon a Time TV series.
It's on ABC, and they're definitely drawing from the Disney references. I feel like Anna and Elsa were part of it, so it's in that canon.
They're definitely drawing from Disney, but they go a different route, and I think over time we've seen lots of adaptations of Snow White that really went a different direction than Grimm's, where like Snow White is this like huntress who, you know, she is in charge of her own destiny, and the reason why she's being pursued is a lot more dark than what even the original tale was.
Yeah.
And the huntsman sometimes becomes a romantic interest, not a prince. They've had lots of fun with the huntsman because he's not a really developed character, so there's a lot there in different adaptations, I think, that you can use.
That's cool. Well, if you're able to make it a park, there's certainly plenty of things available to you, but are there any other resources you'd like to point us to?
So if you are a big fan of the film, as well as a little bit more of the film history and diving more closely into all the gags and details of the animated classic, we've mentioned this podcast before on our podcast, but Disorder from Real Fans from Real Movies, their first episode was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and they really break down a lot of the history, the animators, the animation style. So if you want a little bit more of that aspect of analyzing Snow White, I highly suggest Disorder. And then also, have you listened to all the Disney Princess Ponderings from Disney Coast to Coast?
I started listening to Disney Coast to Coast about a year and a half ago, maybe a little longer. So I think there might have been some that started before I started listening on a weekly basis. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure I've gone back to listen to all of them, but I've listened to anything that came out in succession since I began like subscribing and listening regularly. But yes, Jeff DePaoli talks about a great princess overview for each princess.
They're really fun. I have listened to all of them. So when I started listening to Disney Coast to Coast about a year or two ago, once I saw the first Princess Pondering, I purposely scrolled back and listened to all of them. So they're really fun, where he talks specifically about the princess. He will touch on the original tale, but he looks more at the princesses within their context, but then also what they like, dislike, and other characterizations and personality traits of the princesses. And they're fun episodes. I like listening to them.
Non-Disney, but if you also like fairy tales, this podcast isn't updated regularly anymore. Maybe she'll surprise us and come out with more, but it's called The Singing Bones, and it's an Australian podcaster, and she really just gets into the folklore. So not so much like the Disney adaptations or anything like that, but going into the history of different fairy tales, and even some that I was not as familiar with, but were still interesting to just hear what the story was, how it evolved over time. So I know she did Snow White. It's definitely been a while since I've listened to that. But I'm also going to, surprise, surprise, plug the bonus features. If you have the Blu-ray or any DVD edition, they are certainly worth your time. There was a great 30 or so minute feature just about the making of it, where a lot of those Disney animators and historians, they were able to talk to them and get them on camera discussing their memories, the film's impact, discovered that Don Hahn uncovered unreleased Seven Dwarfs short, and even some of those deleted scenes that we mentioned. So a treasure trove of those there. So those are certainly plenty of resources for you for Snow White, and we are happy to announce what our next episode is. If you're reading along with us, we teased this kind of at our year-end 2018 Mary Poppins episode, but we are planning a Disney vacation, or at least Emily is. Emily is coming to Walt Disney World next month. When will you be here?
Finally, I will be there from February 13th through the 18th, so just a 5-day trip, not as long as I would like. I'm going down for a friend's wedding and was able to build in a couple days in the parks in between, so I was very excited that I could do that and take the time to revisit the parks. And I'm very excited to be there for Epcot, Festival of the Arts. Lots of new experiences that I'm trying to fit in 5 days. But for our next episode, we figured it'd be fun. We've looked at Aaron Wallace's Thinking Man's guides to Magic Kingdom and Epcot, but we wanted to check out maybe the more traditional planning guides for the park. So we are going to look at the Burn Mom's official park planning guide that come out every year, and are pretty big booksellers in the travel section that a lot of people who are new to planning trips probably turn to or have been told to turn to plan their trips. So we're going to take a look through those books and see what's happening in 2019, but also how helpful we think they are as some Disney veterans in planning a trip.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, because certainly, as I've shared, my memories were coming to the park on a regular basis, so we kind of just adapted to things that were new, never really turned to an official guide. So I think it'll be fun to see just what they recommend. Do we agree with their strategies? So that should be coming to you in just a few weeks, because we got to get it done before Emily comes to visit.
I know, I got to finish planning my trip.
In the meantime, if you'd like to follow us on social media, we are Book of the Mouse on Twitter and Instagram, and you can always email us with comments or ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. Please leave us a review on iTunes so others can find our podcast and read and listen along with us. If you'd like to follow me in my adventures, I'm on Instagram @GreatGuthsby and on Twitter @Courtney_Guth. I'm sure you'll want to follow Emily along on her Florida adventures, so where can we find you?
Yes, you'll definitely want to follow me. I'm really big at using Instagram stories. So my Instagram and my Twitter are both @Emily_McD. And I will also be adding stuff to our story on the @Book of the Mouse Instagram as well.
Awesome. So until next time, why don't you take us out with a little quote from the movie?
So we took this from the opening song from Snow White, and we think it's a nice also little entry into 2019, as we all have lots of new hopes and dreams going into a new year. So listeners, make a wish into the well. That's all you have to do. And if you hear it echoing, your wish will soon come true.
So sweet. Well, we wish you the best until next time, and we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Book of the Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.